Minister, the victims of the secret payments and the organised cover-up and deception around those payments are the ordinary licence holder who can go to jail if they don't pay their TV licence, and the nearly 1,800 workers in RTE who didn't benefit from these staggering salaries, payments or slush funds, but who often exist on low or very modest pay and endured pay cuts, pay freezes, bogus self-employment, abuse of fixed-term contracts, lack of resources and equipment to do their job. And they deserve accountability and radical reform to address the rotten culture that produced this scandal. Last week at the committee, of which I'm not a member, but I attended, we had 4 hours before I spoke, and not a single person called out the use of the word talent by the RTE executive until I did, and said, how can you use that obnoxious term to distinguish between a small group at the top paid staggering salaries and the vast majority of the workforce? And the next day, Siún had to come in and apologise and say she was binning that term. But I call that out because the use of that term was indicative of the problem deep in the heart of the culture of RTE. The talent at the top and everybody else is not talent. That was the implication, and that then goes on to justify one law for a small group at the top, staggering salaries, secret payments, slush funds, and for everybody else, tighten your belts, endure rubbishy contracts, no contracts, pay freezes and pay cuts. And the other thing I was the first to put at that committee was that this was an organised, orchestrated deception of the public, the Oireachtas and the workers. And again, Siún had to come in the next day and use exactly the terms that I had put to her and acknowledge that that was the case. Now, if there was an organised deception, somebody organised it. That's self-evident, and we need to know who. And we still do not know who. Fingers were pointed in certain directions, but some of the people at whom those fingers were pointed have still not come before Oireachtas committees, and they need to come and give their side of the story, and maybe we'll learn more, maybe it will look different, but those people have to come into the Oireachtas committee, and we don't need to wait for reviews or audits or anything else for that to happen. Because the public deserve to know. They are furious, and the workers deserve to know. And that has to happen, and it has to happen as a matter of urgency. And we need then to investigate the corrosive impact of commercial interests and outside interests in terms of the culture in RTE and how it could impact on the vitally important question of public service broadcasting. And I want to make it absolutely clear, as I did last week. If we do not have public service broadcasting there to serve the public, the broadcasting we get is the broadcasting of Rupert Murdoch, of Elon Musk, and of big corporate for-profit entities. Those are the only two choices. So either we have publicly funded public service broadcasting, or we have Rupert Murdoch and Musk and all the rest of them. Right, and I know which I want, at least to have the choice to have public service broadcasting. But the condition of funding it properly, and it needs to be funded properly, and not by commercial interests, and not, in my mind, by a regressive tax where you can go to jail, but through fair progressive taxation. And let's start to tax some of these social media companies and digital streamers and so on, who are making an absolute fortune, and in many cases not even paying for their access to the Irish market in terms of what they pay. But we need to look at some other things. Once now certain things have become apparent, and I want these included in your audit and review. The Independent Production Fund needs to be looked at. Now, I've been trying to raise this for years. There's a debate on Thursday, and I'll be interested to hear on a report that I asked my committee to do on Section 481, film, €100 million, which is then supplemented by the Independent Production Fund at RTE, which is €40 million, and then money from Screen Ireland, which is €20 million, all going to the independent production sector. Now, I am for that money going into independent film production, and more. And more. But there has to be conditions attached to ensure that what we have just witnessed at the top of RTE is not also going on in the independent production sector. And we have very strong allegations that it is. That it is. We are told by the representatives of the actors and performers, both within RTE and in terms of the money, public money used to fund the independent production sector, that actors, performers and writers are being robbed of their royalties, and that the copyright directive, which they are entitled to by law, to those royalties, is being flouted, and being flouted systematically by the producers who get money from RTE and from Section 481 and Screen Ireland. That needs to be investigated. How much producer fees are being paid to the companies who are getting money from that fund? I was told today by somebody who I asked, some of them are getting €5,000 a week. And the production companies are getting a slice at the top as well. Now, we need to find out, is that true? Because on the other side of that, we have film crew who are on fixed-term contracts, but where at the end of a production, it's as if they've never worked in the film industry. The clock goes back to zero. And they say there is systematic abuse of the fixed-term workers legislation happening in the Irish film sector with money from RTE. And I've also heard today people saying they go to RTE with ideas for productions. They are told, no, you're not getting the money. And a little while later, a favoured few do exactly the same thing they had suggested to RTE, but they don't get the funding for it, somebody else who are the favoured few. And are there conflicts of interest between those at the top of RTE who say yes or no to independent film production and some of those independent film production companies? We need to know that as well as part of this review and audit.